Hi there, welcome to the show. So, for my story this week, since this is the last show of the year, I thought that for the subject of my story this week, we look at someone that's going to be the focus of what's going wrong in America heading into the new year, and that is, and I'm sorry to say, Steve Bannon, the only guy who could give Steves a worse name than they already have. Steve Bannon popped up in the news recently for exactly what you'd think he'd pop up for.
We have breaking news. Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon has been indicted by a federal grand jury. He is charged with 2 counts of failing to honor a subpoena from the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol insurrection.
That's right. Steve Bannon, the former president's chief strategist, was arrested, which is one of those things you assume would happen, just not more than once. It's sort of like McDonald's making the McRib disappear for most of an entire year. Seriously, though, what kind of meat is that, by the way? Hey, there's got to be an explanation for why it's taken off the menu for almost a whole year, only to be brought back on for only a couple of months. What cut of meat is in that barbecue sauce-coated mystery meat? And this wasn't the first time that Bannon was arrested. Back in August of last year, Bannon was arrested over scamming Trump supporters over his border wall, details of which I will get to later in this piece. The reason why he's been indicted this time is due to the fact that he refused to cooperate with the House Select Committee currently investigating the January 6th Capitol Hill riot, who wanted information about his communications with the former president that took place leading up to the riot. And there's the fact that the day before the riot, he made this eerie prediction about the Stop the Steal rally on his podcast.
The House facing a vote Thursday to hold former Trump ally Steve Bannon in contempt at Congress after he ignored a subpoena related to the siege at the Capitol.
Mr. Bannon told us he wouldn't comply because the former president told him not to.
Lawmakers believe Bannon has knowledge of the planning on January 6, highlighting the comments he made the day before the deadly attack.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. It's not going to happen like you think it's going to.
Strap in and all hell is going to break loose is not what you expect to hear when you're talking about trying to overturn a presidential election. That kind of language, as we all know, is best reserved for describing any roller coaster at Six Flags. Now, the charges that Bannon now faces aren't even that serious. If he's convicted, he'll face just a year in prison and a $100,000 fine, but there's also the possibility he could spend just a month in prison, which I would argue isn't a suitable punishment because Bannon is a lot more dangerous, not physically speaking because he always looks like he's never seen the basic concept of proper grooming and exercise before, but what that kind of ideology he spreads is more dangerous. Just listen to him react to the indictment as he surrendered to the FBI last week.
These signs right here and the guys over here saying insurrection and all that, that's what this country's about. It's freedom of speech. They got their opinions. We have our opinions. Okay? Hang on. They have their opinions. I'm telling you right now, this is going to be the misdemeanor from hell for Merrick Garland, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden. Joe Biden ordered Merrick Garland to prosecute me from the White House lawn when he got off Marine One. And we're going to go on the offense. We're tired of playing defense. We're going to go on the offense on this and stand by.
Okay, so first of all, Biden did not order the Justice Department to indict Steve Bannon. All he did was express his opinion on the White House lawn when asked by the press if Bannon should be indicted. You enormous human potato. Second, think about how kooky that sounded, and it didn't really help his case that there was a guy behind him waving a sign that read "coup plotter" in big black letters as he ranted. But what makes him dangerous is not just the disinformation he peddles, but the people around him and Trump like Peter Navarro and MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell, and the misinformation that he creates where it's basically an alternative reality that makes it difficult to reach out to his listeners and tell him what Bannon peddles is not true. So, if Bannon is facing legal repercussions for his actions relating to January 6th, scamming Trump supporters of their money, and promoting a form of reality relating to the 2020 election that doesn't exist, we thought that this week we'd talk about who exactly Steve Bannon is, who he is and where he came from, what his tactics are, and why what he does makes him a serious threat. And let's start with some backstory. Steve Bannon grew up in Norfolk, Virginia, in a family of pro-union, pro-Kennedy Democrats, with a mother who was a homemaker and a father who worked as a middle manager and a telephone lineman for AT&T, which is already interesting because if there's one company that would create something that would threaten democracy in this country other than a fringe right propaganda network, it would be of course a company that would also provide crappy internet service, which would be AT&T. But what makes Bannon so dangerous isn't that he's delusional, because he is educated. As he graduated from Benedictine Prep College in the early 70s, a private, mostly Catholic military high school in Richmond, and he attended Virginia Tech, where he served as president of the Student Government Association and graduated from the College of Architecture and Urban Studies with a bachelor's in urban planning, and later graduating from both Georgetown and Harvard in the 80s. Now, in between getting various college degrees, Bannon enlisted and served in the U.S. Navy, where he served on the USS Paul F. Foster destroyer as a surface warfare officer, and later as a special assistant to the Chief of Naval Operations at the Pentagon, where his job consisted of tasks like, among other things, handling messages between senior officers and writing reports of the current state of the Navy fleet globally. And it was there where he actually jumped into the political fray. Because with Bannon saying of it, I wasn't political until I got into the service and saw how badly Jimmy Carter effed things up. I became a huge Reagan admirer. And what convinced him to join the GOP was his deployment in the Navy to the Persian Gulf in a mission called Operation Eagle Claw, an attempt by U.S. Special Forces to rescue the Americans in the U.S. Embassy in Iran during the hostage crisis. And the result of the mission was catastrophic.
8 helicopters had to fly nearly 700 miles to a desert landing strip where they would rendezvous with Delta Force, flying in on C-130s. But one helicopter dropped out because of an impending blade failure. The remaining 7 had to grope their way through unexpected clouds of dust. At first, Jim Schaefer thought it was fog.
And I licked my finger, stuck it out the little window on the side, brought it back in, it was full of dust. Kind of harrowing. We were about 300 feet, and we couldn't see the ground at 300 feet.
Disoriented, another helicopter turned back. The remaining 6 finally made it to Desert 1, where Delta Force was having its own problems. A bus full of Iranians had appeared on a dirt road that ran through the landing zone. As illustrated in the documentary, Delta stopped it with a grenade round and detained the passengers. Then Wade Ishimoto saw another set of headlights coming and ordered one of his men to stop it with an anti-tank weapon.
And the next words out of my mouth are, holy mackerel, a fuel truck. We had a 3,000-gallon fuel transporter truck.
A mission which depended on Delta Force reaching the embassy without being detected was lighting up the nighttime sky.
I remember looking at that thing burning and seeing this bus and these shadows and Beckwith saying, "Welcome to World War III."
President Carter called Joint Chiefs Chairman Jones to find out what was happening.
Do you recall why we decided to land just adjacent to a highway?
It's not a highway, sir. It's that little road. It was the only place we'd been able to find so far that we could land.
But that was not the worst of it. A hydraulic pump on one of the remaining helicopters was glowing red hot. The mission was now down to 5 helicopters, which was not enough to pull off the rescue.
The plan said we must leave Desert 1 with at least 6 viable helicopters.
With the mission scrubbed, the rescue force had to get out of Iran as fast as possible. Jim Schaefer started moving his helicopter away from a C-130.
Not realizing that the air traffic controller guy on the ground was getting dust so bad into his mask that he was backing up. As he backed up, he was getting closer to the C-130, and I didn't realize I was kind of drifting sideways to the right.
Schaefer's rotor blades sliced into the C-130.
And the next thing I know, we were on fire and on the ground.
3 Marines, including his crew chief, were in the back.
He said, "I need some help," and I remember reaching back and holding his arm, and I heard this horrible scream, and he let go.
Schaefer dove out his window to the ground, but part of Delta Force was trapped in the back of the burning C-130. Somehow, they all got through a single door and escaped through the flames.
It looked like something from a movie. It looked like they were walking out of hell.
8 Americans were killed. 5 crew members of the C-130 and 3 in the back of Schaefer's helicopter.
Yeah, all of that did happen. Because of the weather, mechanical failure, and unforeseen appearance of Iranian civilians, the operation cost the lives of nearly a dozen service members and a few aircraft, resulting in the mission being called off and rescuing 0 hostages. And when you hear that, you can understand the frustration of just how bad this rescue attempt was, and how frustratingly maddening it is for them to fumble this rescue attempt. Think of it like this. If you had a significant other staying at the hotel from The Shining, and they were trapped by the snow inside facing a homicidal axe-wielding killer, their family is going to be mad at you for not getting a snowplow to mount a rescue attempt. Grow a pair and get them out of that luxurious death trap. Now from there, Bannon bounced around from one business venture after another, with his first venture at Goldman Sachs as an investment banker, and he played a big part in helping Sachs expand its presence in the entertainment industry. Now he later left Sachs to form his own boutique firm where he, among other things, negotiated the sale of the production company Castle Rock Entertainment to Ted Turner, the founder of CNN, and accepted a financial stake in 5 TV shows, the most notable of which was Seinfeld, and he even served as producer of at least 18 movies. Most of those movies he produced were mostly right-wing propaganda movies, which is why Andrew Breitbart, the founder of Breitbart News, referred to Steve Bannon as the Leni Riefenstahl of the Tea Party movement, which is a scary thing to say about someone, other than, of course, calling someone working in your law firm the Jeffrey Toobin of cybersecurity law experts. Now, quick side note here. If you don't know who Leni Riefenstahl was, very basically, she was a film director, but more specifically, she was the chief propaganda producer for the Nazi regime in Germany in the 30s. Now, from there, Bannon took more infamous ventures into positions like co-founder and executive chair of the nonprofit group, the Government Accountability Institute, where he essentially helped his friend Peter Schweizer publish the book Clinton Cash, a pseudo-nonfiction book filled with a litany of debunked claims and conspiracy theories about the Clintons, which is just one of a ridiculous number of books he's written with untrue information. Now, he later co-founded Breitbart, the right-wing news site that, according to one Time magazine journalist, pushed racist, sexist, xenophobic, and anti-Semitic material on a constant basis. Now, Bannon denies that, saying that he has no tolerance for racist and anti-Semitic overtones, despite the fact that the alt-right is littered with those views, and following the death of Andrew Breitbart, Breitbart News' founder, Bannon took the outlet in a more nationalistic and alt-right friendly direction, and he served as chair before and after spending his time in the Trump White House, where he was fired for advising Trump to make those both sides comments in the wake of the violence in Charlottesville. And Bannon was later booted from Breitbart after making these comments in Michael Wolff's book Fire and Fury in January 2018.
Steve Bannon quoted in this new book by Michael Wolff as saying that the meeting that Donald Trump Jr. took, the president's son, with Russians in Trump Tower was, quote, unpatriotic and, quote, treasonous.
Oh, the comments Bannon made about that June 2016 Trump Tower meeting go even further than that. Bannon also claimed that Donald Trump Jr. would crack like an egg on national television, and said the chance that Donald Jr. wouldn't walk those participating in that Trump Tower meeting to Trump's office after the meeting ended was 0. Now, I should add that Bannon has since apologized for those comments and affirmed his support for Trump. So that is what Bannon's history is. The question to ask next is, what is his ideology, and how do other conservatives view him? The answer, depending on who you ask, is different. Because many establishment Republicans fear him, and some in conservative media and other Republican circles aren't fans of Steve Bannon. Ben Shapiro, for instance, has called Bannon a bully who sold out Breitbart's website to back Trump, who he also called a bully. And then there was these famous recorded comments by former Trump White House communications director Anthony Scaramucci, which he made to a journalist for The New Yorker.
Profiles. I don't want to be profiled.
Well,
I'm not Steve Bannon.
What you're trying to do?
I'm not Steve Bannon.
No.
I'm not trying to suck my own. I'm not trying to build my own brand or shrink the president.
Yeah,
I'm sure to serve the country.
Yep. Mooch is definitely describing someone who is genuinely despicable in a pretty crass way, especially when that way sounds like every guy in hectic traffic. Push the pedal down! Did you win your license in a freaking raffle? Move it! But Mooch is not entirely wrong there. Bannon has tried to build his brand off Trump's political strength, and that has not worked out to his liking. In 2017, he backed former Alabama Supreme Court Justice Roy Moore in the special election for Alabama's U.S. Senate seat vacated by Jeff Sessions, despite credible accusations against Moore of having relationships with women who were minors at the time and one allegation of sexual assault. And as a result, Moore lost the election by 2 points, which led to this tweet from Meghan McCain reading, "Suck it, Bannon," to which I say to Meghan McCain, haven't you heard what Scaramucci said? He's been trying to do that for a long time now. And Moore isn't the only losing extremist candidate he's supported. Throughout the 2018 midterm elections, Bannon supported a litany of extremist candidates for various offices. Some of these candidates included, among others, a perennial candidate in Nevada who lost a GOP primary for a House seat, a Confederacy sympathizing state senator in Mississippi who ran a special election for a Mississippi U.S. Senate seat and lost, and a former congressman from Staten Island who sought to retake his seat despite a past of violating campaign finance laws, committing tax evasion and money laundering, and threatening to beat up a reporter. The only candidate backed by Bannon who actually won their election was this insurrection-supporting frat bro here. And while the people he voices support for are concerning themselves, Bannon holds views that even some Republicans should be concerned about. Bannon has often called for what he calls a deconstruction of the administrative state, something that he described in moments like this one at CPAC in 2017 alongside Trump's then Chief of Staff Reince Priebus.
They're corporatist, globalist media that are adamantly opposed to an economic nationalist agenda like Donald Trump has. President Trump really laid this out, as Ryan said, many years ago at CPAC. It's really CPAC that really originally gave him the springboard. It's the first time at Breitbart we started seeing him and saw how people, his speeches resonated with people. And then he would go out to these smaller town halls later, and really he got traction with the same message he's bringing today. Here's why it's going to get worse, because he's going to continue to press his agenda. And as economic conditions get better, as more jobs get better, they're going to continue to fight. If you think they're going to give you your country back without a fight, you are sadly mistaken. Every day it is going to be a fight. And that is what I'm proudest about Donald Trump. All the opportunities he had to waver off this, all the people have come to him and said, oh, you got to moderate. Every day in the Oval Office, he tells Reince and I committed this to the American people. I promised this when I ran, and I'm going to deliver on this.
So what Bannon is essentially doing there is telling extremists to continue being extreme while also taking a full-throttle drive at every issue as if it were a fight, especially when it comes to the culture war bullshit that conservatives regularly engage in. And what makes the use of the phrase deconstruction of the administrative state more alarming is the fact that Bannon has openly called himself a Leninist, saying of it, Lenin wanted to destroy the state, and that's my goal too. I want to bring everything crashing down. And when you have that ideology that's been repeatedly repudiated by Republicans throughout American history, and those on the political right embracing a guy who embraces that ideology, you can see that not only is that inconsistent, but dangerous. It's like being in charge of running a hen house and refusing to let predators eat your hens, and your best method for protecting them is hiring a coyote as the security guard. And when you take all these things together, the Islamophobia, the anti-Semitism, the nationalist right-wing ideology, and other worst characteristics of populism, and his intellect, it's no wonder Bannon has not only pushed to get such authoritarian governments installed not just in the US, but around the world. Bannon has been supportive of right-wing parties in multiple countries in Europe, most notably Hungary and Poland, both of which have turned authoritarian in the last decade under the right-wing party's control of both governments. He even once tried and failed to set up a training academy at a monastery in Italy for these right-wing groups to train, to run in their country's elections, and eventually govern and implement nationalist policies, which is the equivalent of him being Plankton and implementing Plan Z, which has the potential to actually work and make life for everyone affected by this really crappy. And when you set the politics aside in regards to Bannon, you see that he has characteristics that make him a truly terrible human being. The first thing to point out about him is what Ben Shapiro pointed out, which is that Bannon is a bully. Take Bannon's second marriage. In 1996, Bannon was charged with misdemeanor offenses of domestic violence, battery, and dissuading a witness after his second wife accused him of domestic abuse. According to the crime report from police in Santa Monica, after an officer showed up at their house, the officer noticed that Bannon's then wife had red marks on both her wrists and her neck, and it later emerged that Bannon and his lawyer made threats to his wife to get her to not show up in court, and as a result, the charges against Bannon were dropped. And it gets worse, because Bannon has also used threatening language, like claiming that Dr. Fauci and FBI Director Chris Wray would have their heads on pikes, comments which led to him being booted from both Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. But it would be bad enough if Bannon was just a bully, but he's also a con artist and incredibly deceitful. There are multiple stories to prove his conning and deceit, from his work for the company Cambridge Analytica, to his role in a scheme along with this deceased Republican strategist to explicitly suppress minority voting rights by adding a citizenship question to the 2020 census, but the most prolific example, of course, would be this.
And 3 others are accused of defrauding hundreds of thousands of people by personally profiting off a scheme to raise money to help build President Trump's border wall.
That's right. Last year, Bannon was indicted over his work with a nonprofit group known as We Build the Wall, which was founded to help raise money for Trump's border wall on private land, and every detail of this story is incredible. For starters, there's the way that Bannon was arrested. as he was arrested on a Chinese billionaire's yacht. And it wasn't by the FBI, but by agents working for the Postal Service, which is just simply insane. It's like if Transportation Department Secretary Pete Buttigieg sent DOT agents to deliver Pizza Hut to my door. Well, this is quite not what your job normally consists of. And why did you forget the cheese dip I want to dunk my pizzone in? Now, the nonprofit was founded with Bannon and a guy named Brian Kolfage, an amputee who served in the U.S. Air Force. The organization took money from individual donors under the promise that it would go to building sections of border wall on private land. And the organization raised around $25 million, quite a bit of it getting redirected back to both Bannon and Kolfage, who worked together with others to misappropriate hundreds of thousands of dollars for their own personal benefit. Bannon spent his money on personal expenses, and Kolfage spent his money on flamboyant purchases like a luxury SUV, golf cart, jewelry, and payments toward a boat. Now here is where, legally, I have to tell you that Bannon and Kolfage deny those charges, but it points this moment from a fundraising marathon in a very different light.
Welcome back. This is Stephen K. Bannon. We're off the coast of Saint-Tropez in southern France in the Mediterranean. We're on the $1 million yacht of Brian Kolfage. And Brian Kolfage, he took all that money from Build the Wall. No, we're actually in Sunland Park, New Mexico.
I get it, because it's funny to joke about stealing other people's money. But you know what they say, all jokes have an element of truth in them. Now, after Bannon's arrest, Trump distanced himself from Bannon's nonprofit, saying that he knew nothing about the nonprofit, but that's kind of hard to believe given that Don Jr. was at an event with Kolfage describing the nonprofit as private enterprise at its finest. And here's Chris Kobach on the group's own YouTube page saying that he knew exactly where Trump really stood.
I was speaking with the president, and we were talking about a variety of issues, and the topic came up. I mentioned that I was working with We Build the Wall, and he said, "Will you tell the people you are working with that this project has my blessing?" And he went further, and he said, "I want the media to know that this project has my blessing." He was really making a point that he was behind this.
Of course he was. I'm surprised he didn't say that Trump gave the project his blessing, that is, until it fails, and he wants nothing to do with this. That's basically how the man works. Now, to be fair, some of the money raised did in fact go to border wall construction. Around $10 million of that money went to build some private land border wall sections in New Mexico. They also had money used to build a section of wall directly along the Rio Grande, and the company that did both sections was Fisher Sand and Gravel, a construction company that was turned down by the DHS and Army Corps of Engineers due to the company's border wall designs not meeting operational requirements and the fact that the company had a number of red flags.
Fisher has been hit with lawsuits, one from the federal government for sexual discrimination in New Mexico. It settled for $150 grand. The company and the founder's son were both accused of tax fraud in 2009. The son pleaded guilty. The company paid more than $1 million in back taxes.
So they cheated to get ahead, were caught in the act, yet somehow they're still around. I guess that makes them the Tom Brady of construction companies. But there's more. Over the years, the company racked up around 2,000 violation notices from city, county, state, and federal regulatory bodies, along with close to 500 criminal charges for violations in Phoenix, where the company ran an asphalt plant, charges which were reduced to civil penalties after Fisher agreed to permanently close the asphalt plant. Also, local governments have rejected Fisher's bids on contracts due to considering, among other things, the former head of the family of companies, Fisher Industries, was convicted for possessing child pornography. And if those controversies were already bad enough, the company's construction of sections of wall don't seem to be structurally sound. The Rio Grande section was nicknamed by the company's head, Tommy Fisher, as the Lamborghini of walls, and saying that it will stand for 150 years, you mark my words. But as an investigation by both ProPublica and the Texas Tribune found out, it seems to be conking out 149 years earlier than they previously expected.
A ProPublica and Texas Tribune investigation found erosion beneath the foundation of a stretch of wall in Texas. That stretch was just built in January of this year by Fisher Sand and Gravel.
I'm just doing this with one hand, not even exerting myself.
So I guess it is the Lamborghini of walls, and by that I mean when you get near it, the owner yells you not to touch it, as it will lose value and you could break it. Now, Fisher's attorney says that the erosion is a normal part of new construction, and if there are issues that come up, they'll address them. Well, issues are coming up, as experts say it was concerning to see that much erosion around the fence and that segments of the structure could topple into the Rio Grande River if not fixed. So unsurprisingly, Bannon was pardoned by Trump over that scam, but Kolfage is still under indictment of charges of defrauding the IRS and filing false tax returns. And whenever Bannon is held accountable for actions like this, his tactics always include attacking the media and angry tirades like the one you saw at the beginning of this piece. But the problem with Bannon in his provocative and hyperpartisan rhetoric is really appealing to other people in the GOP, even if it's not members of the fringe right. And while Bannon may be compared to someone like Lena Riefenstahl, I'd argue that he's different, as Riefenstahl had no knowledge of the atrocities committed by the Nazis, while Bannon was and is an active participant in putting fuel on the fire that led to January 6th and him being labeled a coup plotter. And we need to hold Bannon and the others involved in planning January 6th accountable, even when the punishment is potentially light. Because if we do nothing about people like Bannon, we give a green light to others like him to carry out acts similar to January 6th, which would all have to look at each other and say, if I may borrow a couple of phrases from Bannon, strap in, all hell is going to break loose. That's my show. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back next February. Please stay safe until then. Good night.